I will be the first to admit that I'm an MCU shill. It's literally in my channel bio. I'm not exactly trying to hide it. The MCU is my favorite piece of media ever created and will always hold a special place in my heart for bringing these characters to life. I could tell you every film and TV show in reverse chronological order in my sleep. A clear sign of how passionate I am about this universe and that I need to go outside more. But here's the thing. The MCU is far from perfect. For as much as I may love it, I have quite a few problems with the Hatman's handling of the franchise. So I figured I would finally lay them all out in a constructive way about how the MCU can improve itself. And also because I know Kevin Feige watches these videos and makes decisions just to screw with me, but I can't prove it yet, so hopefully he'll learn something from this, and that'll be my way of outing him as a fan. Without a shadow of a doubt, my biggest problem with the MCU right now is that there is a noticeable 2-hour mandate with the movies. It seems like every new Marvel film, with a few notable exceptions, is barely scratching anything higher than 2 hours, and that drives me crazy. I promise you, Marvel, our attention spans haven't degraded that badly yet. A movie only needs to be as long as it takes to tell the story at hand, and sometimes that can be done in 2 hours. Thunderbolts is a great recent example of that, as that movie has a strong 2-hour 6-minute runtime, and director Jake Schreier confirmed that he didn't have to make any cuts to get there.
There's not a heck of a lot of scenes that didn't go in the movie.
But for every Thunderbolts, there's a movie like The Marvels where you can clearly tell it was chopped up in the editing room. And I say that from a place of love as one of 16 people who really enjoys that movie. But this runtime restriction often hinders even some of their best movies, as some higher up who gets paid too much money won't let them go any longer. I think there was a notable shift in the midst of Phase 4. Let me run through some things and show you what I mean. From Black Widow to No Way Home, there's a very consistent stretch of movies that go anywhere from 2 hours 12 minutes to 2 hours 36 minutes. But then, with the release of Multiverse of Madness, there's a sudden drop to 2 hours 6 minutes. Not too bad, but then Love and Thunder released at a suspicious 1 hour and 59 minutes, and from there, it's clearly an intentional mandate by the studio, and that isn't even speculation, it's something that has been outright confirmed. There was a report around the time Love and Thunder released saying that Marvel told director Taika Waititi that the film had to come in under 2 hours. That lines up with other rumors of cut scenes from the movie that would have featured Gore doing some actual god butchering, which is, crazy that we barely saw that. So this is clearly not a new phenomenon with Marvel, as they've done it before and have continued to do it for the last 3 years. This is, of course, because you can fit more 2-hour showings in theaters and watch the money come rolling in. Longer runtimes take up more time slots and can often be daunting for audience members who can't commit that much time to a film. So because of that, it seems to me that Marvel has been playing it way too safe and prioritizing profit over all else. And it sucks to see, because looking back at recent MCU films, my biggest problem is always in the pacing and that it flies by too fast. Even with Marvel hitting some of their highest highs in movies like Fantastic Four: First Steps, you can tell that movie was cut to hell in the editing room. I mean, God, the Sunday dinner clip they've been posting every single Sunday at 7 o'clock on the dot, no matter what, didn't even make it into the film. It feels like with Fantastic Four and a lot of these other films, there's a 2-hour 15-minute sweet spot that would let these movies breathe and deliver on a more complete experience. Or, just better yet, let movies be however long they need to be. If Fantastic Four needs to be 2 hours and 30 minutes, then let it be that long. It's not that complicated. I'm sure Spider-Man Brand New Day and the next 2 Avengers films will be longer since they're guaranteed moneymakers, but I hope that we also get to see more MCU movies get longer runtimes when deemed necessary, which, is more often than not, it seems. I know for a fact there is a 2-hour 15-minute cut of the Fantastic Four out there somewhere that will be my favorite movie of all time, and they're keeping it from me. Just put the editing software down, guys. I promise you it will be okay. You do not have to be so reactionary. And while we're on the runtime topic, I want to briefly discuss another MCU time problem, because if I talk about this for any longer than a few minutes, I'll start getting vicious war flashbacks. That being the 6-episode event format. God, just saying it sends a shiver down my spine. That series structure has been terrorizing us for years and is so very rarely utilized to its full potential. Outside of a show like Loki, which I think did it the best, it feels like every 6-episode MCU series struggles to balance things and often results in a hasty ending. A lot of these characters, especially with someone like Moon Knight, thrive in a long-running serialized epic. I will say, thankfully, it does seem like Marvel has finally started to realize the error of their ways. Agatha All Along and Born Again were each 9 episodes long, while Wonder Man will be 8 episodes at the end of the year. It's a step in the right direction and hopefully means that Marvel will make the most out of the TV medium. Sorry, what's that? They did what? 4 episodes? Okay, well the monkey's paw clearly just curled inwards. If I've done my math right, that's a step backward, guys. We are moving in the wrong direction. I doubt this is indicative of the future of MCU TV, but I do really hope we start to see a more traditional television structure in the future. Low-budget, long-running shows are the move in my opinion. Not to sound like a guy who is stuck in the past, but shows used to drop yearly and be 24 episodes long. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. should be the blueprint. Look at what they managed to do, on a television budget no less. And I'm not even asking for half of that. I would just like to see Marvel experiment with longer shows and not make us wait so long in between seasons. I'd love to see a 12-episode Moon Knight season or a 9-episode follow-up to Hawkeye. They've laid some great foundations for these characters, and I'd be really interested to see what they can do with more time and focus to give these characters multiple arcs in one season. And let me just get one more quick nitpick about MCU TV out of the way, because I really don't like how they use a widescreen aspect ratio. Every single Marvel show is shot with a 21:9 aspect ratio, and I know it shouldn't bother me, but it genuinely does. And I totally get why they do it. It gives the universe a more uniform aesthetic and makes things feel cinematic. The letterboxing on the top and bottom of the screen has trained our brains to believe that the black bars make a picture look fancier. But the thing is, I'm not watching these shows on a giant theater screen that can properly show that kind of widescreen format. I'm either watching this on my TV or my laptop at 3 a.m. when I should be asleep but got distracted getting more clips and ended up rewatching Loki in its entirety for the 4th time. Happens way more often than you'd think. I would like the entire screen to be utilized to its full potential, please. Let me see this gorgeous picture fill the screen and dazzle me with larger-than-life visuals. The only series that has properly utilized an aspect ratio is Born Again, as they actually used it in an interesting way to show Matt dialing in on his radar sense. And that rocked! So unless you are using it for creative and experimental filmmaking, please God, just use a taller aspect ratio that embraces the television medium more and properly fills the screen. Alright, there's no more delaying the inevitable. I may as well address what seems to be the biggest problem across the board in the MCU, the CGI. It feels like every single project they've released over the last 3 years has had at least one moment of distracting VFX. The only exceptions I can think of are Guardians 3, which had a very long post-production window, Wakanda Forever, which was shot as practically as possible during the pandemic, and Thunderbolts, which is a relatively grounded movie besides that last act. Everything else always has that one scene that takes you out of the moment. Sometimes, certain projects are dealt with the short end of the stick and don't get the time they need to finish the CGI across the board, and that is so unfortunate. It's no fault of the incredibly talented VFX artists who work tirelessly to bring these visuals to life either. They are always doing the best they can, but are constrained by a short post-production window and indecisiveness behind the scenes, causing them to rush things into the film. And because of that, we're stuck with shots like this. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir right now because we all know this is a problem, right? Everyone saw this coming. And I'm very well aware that most of this is due to the fact that they were shooting movies during a pandemic and it was a much more intensive VFX process. But it's the easiest problem ever to fix. All it takes is some careful planning and commitment ahead of time to not crunch any animators with a VFX-heavy movie to finish in well under a year. I'm not saying they can't change things on the fly. Sometimes you're not going to think of something until you're there on the day. But at the very least, you gotta have a finished draft of the script that you'll be happy with before the movie starts. I feel like I sound insane pitching such a basic concept, but it really is that easy. Delay the movie however long it takes to make the best possible finished final product. Please, I am begging you. Earlier this year, visual effects artists finally got to unionize at Disney, giving them a historic contract that provided them more rights and safety in their jobs, which I think is great. We are already directly seeing the benefit of that, as Avengers Doomsday and Secret Wars were both delayed to give them more time to work on the films. So it seems like things are trending in a much more positive direction, and I hope that we can see much more of that going into the future. Even a movie like Fantastic Four is a great example of how to utilize VFX. That movie wrapped 9 months out from its release and had some really intensive CGI sequences that all look gorgeous. That's because they were able to start on those VFX shots before principal photography began.
Despite the strikes, yes, we've been working with, VFX and with production design and building our world, and that's been incredibly exciting. And
as they had the story locked in and weren't making drastic changes. And while that movie does have the trademark one scene where it looks rough around the edges, it also has some of the most spectacular visual effects I have ever seen in a superhero movie. With a few tweaks to the schedule, they would have a really great artist-friendly production method that would result in all of their projects looking better than ever. And I think we all want to see that, and much less of whatever this is. Something I do want to see more of, though, are consistent leitmotifs for characters in the MCU. For those of you who don't know what a leitmotif is, besides being a fancy word I say to sound smarter, it's a recurring theme throughout a musical composition that is associated with a particular person. It's basically someone's theme song. The MCU has their fair share of iconic themes. Captain America, Black Panther, the Fantastic Four, and the Avengers are up there as some of the all-time greatest. But that's like 4 songs, and there's been over 50 MCU projects. We should have so many more iconic themes in the MCU, but for some reason, they are constantly changing them from appearance to appearance. God, I can already tell this section's gonna be difficult to edit. I need you all to just visualize sound for a second so I don't get sued to oblivion playing all these themes. This isn't even a new thing either. It is something they have constantly struggled with from the beginning. Arguably the most popular character in the history of the MCU, Iron Man, had his theme changed in nearly every single appearance. There was no musical consistency between all the Iron Man movies, and his presentation suffered because of it. The Iron Man 3 theme might be a banger, but it isn't iconic or something most people would associate with the character. While they have gotten better at it over the years, we're still seeing that disconnect. Brave New World got rid of Sam's perfect Louisiana hero theme in favor of a much more generic soundtrack to fit the political thriller vibes. Sacrificing the chance to create a timeless soundtrack for, well, I guess, that's the thing. I don't know why they're doing that. There isn't really a justification when you can easily make a leitmotif fit pretty much every tone. The way a song becomes iconic is through repetition. No matter how good a theme might be, if it's only used once and they replace it the next time we see a character, it's kind of hard to get that organic connection. A simple song is able to invoke so much emotion and make this universe feel all the more connected. Let me use 2 iconic scenes from Infinity War to show you exactly what I'm talking about. We all remember this shot here of Tony suiting up with nanotech for the first time, but could you tell me what song is playing as he's doing this? No, because they don't play any of his leitmotifs here. Look at that in contrast with Steve Rogers' first appearance in the movie, because I know you can hear the song playing in the background when he steps into that frame. A good recurring theme makes these scenes infinitely more memorable. If I had to take a guess, they probably don't do it because they don't want to pay the other composer licensing rights for using that theme, but I don't care about that, it's not my money. Let these characters have their own established leitmotifs so we can track their journeys throughout the MCU through music. And that way, we can also listen to how these themes change with the character as they grow over the years. It's just another added layer that only improves on the storytelling potential. It has bothered me for years, and I cannot believe they refuse to fix it. Especially if that means I'll get Louisiana Hero back. Okay, you don't understand how desperate I am, Marvel. I made this entire video just so I can rant about it. Please, bring it back to me, I am begging you. God, I cannot tell you how good all of this feels to get off my chest. And oh boy, this next one has been annoying me for years. Mr. Kevin unknown middle name Feige, please, for the love of God, stop killing off your villains. I cannot tell you how many times I've become invested in a villain in the MCU, only to see them die at the end of the movie or show, and not just a vague death that still leaves the door open for a return down the line. No, I'm talking Cassandra Nova getting atomized kind of deaths. It happens far too often for my liking, and I am so tired of it. There are times where it is absolutely needed for a narrative, and that works. I totally understand that. But what's the reason for killing off someone like MODOK? He's one of the most recurring villains in Marvel Comics and died in his first appearance. I get he's a very flawed adaptation, but there could have been room for growth to fix him and get him to the point where he's leading AIM. But instead, his 5-head is currently rotting in the quantum realm. Marvel loves to kill off their antagonists when they don't have any future plans for them, in spite of the fact that it's usually more interesting when they come back in the future. One of my favorite things about superhero comics is the concept of a recurring antagonist. One-offs are cool and all, but there's something so special about a villain that gets to come back time and time again to ruin the hero's life. It's why someone like Loki is widely considered to be one of the MCU's best antagonists. He was able to come back and develop more and more, which did wonders for his character. Meanwhile, it feels like we're barely scratching the surface with some of these other characters, and I would love to see more of them. Let them grow and change over time just like the hero to contrast how far they've both come. Let some get redemption arcs while others get even worse. I want to see proper rogues galleries develop in the MCU to make the entire universe feel more alive. There are at least 80 superheroes running around New York City at any given time, and there should be 3 times as many villains, making that place hell. Someone like Mysterio is my biggest example of a villain who shouldn't have been killed off, and I'm not just saying that because he's my favorite villain of all time. They perfectly adapted and reinvented him for the MCU, only to kill him off immediately after ruining Peter's life forever. It feels like there's a new chapter of their rivalry waiting to be written, but we aren't getting any progress because Marvel seems to be doing this whole one and done thing. And this bleeds into a much bigger problem I have, which is that we hardly see any arch enemy rivalries in the MCU. The only one I can think of is Kingpin and Daredevil? Maybe Daredevil and Bullseye as well after Born Again? At least Daredevil seems to know what's up. I mean, there's Thor and Loki to an extent, but that got resolved a while ago, so I wouldn't count it today. Other than that, there is a frustrating lack of iconic rivalries playing out on screen, and I think that needs to change as soon as possible. I need to see our heroes deal with a constant pain in their ass, always trying to ruin their lives for the love of the game alone. An endless game of cat and mouse is so entertaining to watch, and there simply just isn't enough of that in the MCU right now. I hope we start to see that change as the MCU introduces someone like their own take on the Green Goblin for Spider-Man, or brings back the Red Skull for Captain America, or a proper Doctor Doom for the Fantastic Four. I am very much so advising that this specific take on Doctor Doom is a one-off. Yeah, they're allowed to go back to killing off villains here. Then hopefully we can get the real Doctor Doom in the future, maybe even as soon as Secret Wars. Doctor Doom is undisputedly the biggest Romani character in comics, and they didn't cast a Romani actor to play him. It is a simple fact that being Romani is a fundamental part of his origin and what shaped him into becoming the dictator he is today. It's doing Romani people a huge disservice to have their biggest opportunity for non-stereotypical representation played by Robert Downey Jr., of all people. Representation is one of the most important aspects of the superhero genre. These characters embody all different walks of life and are supposed to reflect the world outside your window. They shouldn't be afraid to embrace these characters for who they are. It's what made them so beloved in the first place. The MCU would honestly be better as a whole if they just embraced the comics, which, coincidentally enough, is my next piece of criticism. Wow, what a transition. I think the MCU needs to go out of its way to adapt the tone of the comics more. There's a perfect balance between the world outside your window and a larger-than-life universe that feels forever changed by superheroes that I don't think they've struck quite yet. The vibe of the MCU is that they try to approach things from the lens of how a character would operate in the real world. Because of that, costumes are often more militarized and the overall aesthetic is very grounded for the most part. I don't want the MCU to be fully comic accurate because an adaptation needs to change things, but there's a certain exaggerated style that I think we're missing out on. Fantastic Four was a great first step towards embracing the comics, but that takes place in another universe. At the very least, it's proof that they're capable of honoring these characters' histories, so just take that aspect over to the sacred timeline. I want to see the mainline MCU go in a similar direction that makes things feel more like a heightened reality. That's the term I'm looking for. A world that is like our own, but amped up to 11. One where a character like Stiltman appearing wouldn't feel out of place, or a universe that isn't afraid to give Sam Wilson a bird sidekick. Don't shy away from the sillier aspects of comics anymore, and instead embrace them with open arms. Give us bright, vibrant visuals that look like comic panels come to life. Creative filmmaking that showcases these characters in the most dazzling way possible. Look at how Fantastic Four handled a character like Galactus. What some people would call goofy, they played 100% earnestly, and the movie fully benefits from it. The best way to do that is to give more projects to directors with inspired visions, along with not restricting their freedom. The superhero genre is at its best when you get someone involved who has an important story to tell in a fresh and exciting way. It's why movies like Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four were so critically successful. Jake Schreier and Matt Shakman are two directors who brought a unique tone and style to each of their films that we hadn't seen before in the MCU. I need them to keep following this path and seek out new directors who not only understand these characters, but offer us something we haven't seen before, and then actually let them see their vision through to the end. Nia DaCosta has gone on the record to say that The Marvels was not the movie she originally envisioned, and it's a massive shame she didn't get to see her vision through to the end. She is an immensely talented filmmaker, and you can tell that The Marvels had even more interesting ideas that were cut down in the final version. I need Marvel Studios to have more faith in their directors and allow them to go wild with ideas. Playing it safe leads to things getting stale, and you hired these people for a reason. More director freedom and creativity is a need for the future. And also, please give the comic creators more credit while we're at it. The MCU wouldn't exist without decades of tireless and thankless work from so many writers and artists. I want to see them get proper thanks and payment for their ideas being used. These are billion-dollar characters. The least they can do is cut those writers and artists a check. My last piece of constructive criticism is Secret Invasion, just the entirety of that show as a whole. I need to be careful talking about it because this can slip so easily into an angry crash out for wasting such an interesting premise on a CGI snooze fest, and I'm doing it right there. But surely there must be something I can constructively criticize about this show, some big lesson to be learned that must never be done again. Okay, I got it. The reason Secret Invasion turned out the way it did was because Marvel was doing way too much at once. Projects weren't getting the care and oversight they deserved, and when that happens, you get something like Secret Invasion. It was ignored and rewritten so many times behind the scenes and resulted in this. It's why the MCU needs a much healthier release schedule that doesn't cram too many things in at once, while still maintain a healthy balance of letting us see these characters regularly. Taking some time to reset and slow down not only allows people to miss the MCU more, but they're allowed to get caught up and enjoy things at a reasonable pace, all while the studio has more time behind the scenes to work on each project. It's a nice happy medium that still allows for the universe to move forward, but not the overwhelming rate Disney mandated them to keep up with. If I had to make a decision, I think a good pace to have is 2 live-action movies and 2 live-action shows every year. They can do as many animated shows as they want because I feel like that's a different medium entirely and almost always not set in the mainline universe. But with 4 live-action MCU projects every year, they can dedicate a quarter of the calendar year entirely to that project. It's more than enough time to promote it and keep things evenly spaced out. I could keep giving MCU constructive criticism for hours, but this video is already long enough. I feel like this is more than enough to start a conversation, and maybe one day I'll make part 2, who knows. What I do know is that I love the MCU through all of its highs and lows. As someone who grew up enamored by the Marvel Universe, seeing all of this in live action has been really exciting to me. And while the MCU is hardly ever perfect, it never was from the start. There will always be ups and downs for however long it goes on, and trust me, this universe is going to outlive us all. I just want to see it improve and be as good as it possibly can be, and the only way things can improve is with constructive criticism that addresses real problems head on. So Kevin Feige, the man this video was made for and someone I can only assume is still watching right now, I hope we can see the MCU grow and make changes for the better. I truly believe its best years are ahead of it if 2025's success rate is anything to go by. That being said, give me a new Captain America movie and I would delete this video so fast. I am very easy to bribe and even more desperate to see him again. But why don't you let me know down below your constructive criticism for the MCU? I would genuinely love to hear what everyone has to say and continue the conversation down below. And while you're at it, make sure to give the video a like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. If you don't do it, I'm gonna personally make sure every Marvel project from now on ends like Secret Invasion did, and nobody wants that. Nobody.